Hi,
We are the
Dyslexia Duo.
Each week, we sit down with amazing people, including top researchers and experts in dyslexia, powerful advocates, affected individuals, and more.
Together we break down the myths, share real stories, highlight research and strategies to advise our listeners about this prevalent learning disability. Come join us!
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So we have a very special guest with us today. And, he first kind of popped onto my LinkedIn, and I was like, who is this? And then he kept showing up more and more and more in my social. And I was like, he's somebody who knows a little something about something.
He was in my Facebook.
Very good. So, Dr. Chandler, will you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you all today. My name is Brennan Chandler. I am currently an assistant professor of dyslexia at Georgia State University, where I lead research on intensive interventions for kids who struggle with reading, such as dyslexia, train graduate students in methods of evidence-based instruction, really in reading and writing, and also get to work with parents and community partners to really support literacy initiatives across Georgia and also across the U.S.
Very nice. So, from what I read about you, you started as a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher and transitioned into research and into training and so on. Kind of tell us about that journey a little bit, and why did you focus on dyslexia and structured literacy?
Yeah, so I started my career as a 20-year-old second grade teacher in a really urban, high needs Title I school. And I found myself immediately drawn to the kids for whom learning how to read was not intuitive. So those kids who struggled, I was really, really drawn to. But I realized rather quickly, I think how to teach pedagogically. I knew explicit instruction and really how to provide good instruction, but I didn't fully understand what to teach. Really at that linguistic level, when we think about breaking down words and teaching kids how to read, I didn't really know how to teach reading. And so I went back to school. I had my undergrad degree or my bachelor's in early childhood and elementary ed, but I thought, you know what, let's change it up. Let's get a master's in special education. Maybe then I can really dig into and figure out why these kids are struggling to learn how to read and what I can do to help address those needs. And so that gave me a really good foundation, again, on how to teach, but still really wanted deeper clarity on that science really of reading, or really how to teach reading. And so I taught special ed a little bit. I loved it. I moved to New York City. I had a really, really great Orton Gillingham training at the associate level by a fantastic Orton Gillingham fellow there, Katie. In my training, in that 170 hours, I really learned the structure of English. So I really learned the structure of the English language, and really what all those components were. But even with using those methods, some kids that I worked with still needed more intensity. They still needed more precision. And so that really, for me, sparked this big question of why do some students, especially those with dyslexia, still struggle even with maybe high quality intervention, which to me was this sort of Orton Gillingham based intervention at the time. And so that led me to look online, pursue my PhD at UT Austin to study intensive reading intervention for students with really persistent reading difficulties, and really think about and dig into why they struggled and what really good instruction in intensive intervention is. So I had amazing training at UT Austin. My advisor, Dr. Jessica Tost, was incredible. Got to work with some really, really top researchers in reading intervention. Sharon Vaughn, I learned how research really designed from her. Nathan Clemens really helped push my thinking through and thinking about adding spelling as a mechanism to help with intensive intervention. And so my work now really focuses on closing this gap between really what research has long known, some questions we still need to answer, and then what kids actually receive in classrooms, and really how to support teachers, and now really including parents in that conversation to help kids with dyslexia and their reading skills.
We overlook spelling quite a bit, and not just in the gen ed classroom, but you've been to Texas. We have Texas Dyslexia Law. We have therapists or DTI on every campus. And I still see teachers, they'll get through the meat of the curriculum, but then they get to spelling out, we'll go to another day. And I'm like, it's hand in hand. It's lockstep. We should be doing this every single time.
Definitely. Yeah. Writing too, generally, like writing, spelling, all of that. It really enhances reading outcomes when you look at the research. And also I'm a writing person. I love writing and spelling. And so I think it's also fun to teach once you know how to do it successfully.
So what do you think now that you know what you know and you look back to your 20-year-old self? What do you think about that difference
I'm
of the two
trying
people?
I'm trying to give myself some grace because really I thought I was doing the best I could with what I had. And
Right,
so
right.
when I look back on those times, I really knew how to support language comprehension. I really knew how to plan a really great read aloud, really
Hmm.
scaffold oral language for my students. But looking about that now, I'm like, gosh, I really wish I would have known what I know now. And really, I think we overcomplicate things sometimes too much when we think about
Hmm.
reading intervention and really think about the science of reading movement, and that really what I needed to do was not that complex. And so
Hmm.
giving myself some grace. And also now I get to train the next generation of teachers
Right.
to sort of learn from my mistakes and really equip them with these evidence-based practices that they can use in their settings.
Yeah, because I think about me as an educator when I first started, and I think about we're trying to have a conversation with somebody who's going to be talking about the misconceptions of dyslexia in teacher education programs. That's coming up pretty soon. I just wonder, like, thinking about how we all were when we were first starting out and what we didn't know about dyslexia, how you would maybe change teaching somebody about it now. Like, is there anything you would give them differently if you were doing a teacher PD or anything like that? Just kind of off the cuff.
Yeah, no, I would change everything. And so I do this now for a living. I do teacher trainings at districts, at state level. I get to train teacher educators, like professors in my state, and help support that in my own college. And so really going through thinking about the science of really learning, like pedagogically, what explicit instruction is, really how to scaffold learning, then integrating like in the structure of the English language, and really understanding sort of teacher knowledge around what phonology is, orthography, morphology, syntax, and all
Mm-hmm.
of those good things. And really showing how those two work together in tandem is really what I aim to support teachers to do currently now. So really showing how you can take really good teaching practices that are going to cut across all content areas. That's just good teaching. I love teaching about explicit instruction, and then embedding the actual the content, and then using, and I think this is a big one that I'm to really empower teachers and empower your instructional decision making is just so powerful. And again, it's really not that hard in showing teachers how to analyze a graph visually and how to show you can actually see if your instruction is working or not working so well, and you can make decisions around what you're seeing with that data. And so all of those things I think are really empowering for teachers and would be really empowering for me, and would really demystify really what good
Mm-hmm.
teaching is of reading and writing.
I 100% agree. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, and I agree with you about the data piece. I think we train our teachers now, if not at the college level, because I did not get my master's until 2018 or something like that. And even then, when I got my bachelor's back in 91, it was whole
Mm-hmm.
language,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so even when I got my master's in triple lit, we talked about dyslexia, not necessarily structured literacy, but we talked about dyslexia for one class. And I was like, okay, this is still going on. That's kind of weird. But I think we're better now post teaching when we train teachers in the school setting about structured literacy and the science of reading and all of that. But I do think a lot of teachers don't know what to do with their data and how to address the deficits by using that data in their setting. So I do agree with
Mm-hmm.
that. But your website notes a mission to bridge the gap between what we know from research and what we do in practice. So day to day, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think I just have the best job. I get to do so many things. And so I really get to choose my own adventure when it comes to my research, my teaching, and then also my service, providing support to the community. And I think really what it means day to day for me is staying relentlessly curious. So I'm constantly reading, learning, updating, and refining really my own understanding and growing in my own knowledge of what reading science is, writing science, really the science of teaching reading, which is kind of different than the science of reading, like how kids acquire reading versus what are the practices
Right.
to actually teach that the most efficient way. And so I really in the day-to-day aim to make the science really usable, not just true because it is, but also practical for teachers. And so these days it's thinking a lot about what makes a practice not only evidence-based, but actually implementable in really the real world. And so much of my day-to-day is thinking about designing sort of routines, tools, toolkits, and interventions that help teachers apply this science and not just know it. And so one of those questions I'm asking a lot is, what are the barriers for teachers? What's the simplest change that could have the biggest impact? Because we're seeing a lot, right? 49 plus states have science of reading or literacy related legislation that have mandated curricula or high quality instructional materials, which some of them are really, really great materials potentially, but that implementation isn't there always to really take
Right.
what is high quality and help teachers implement it. They're just being told, do this. And so that's not a great feeling
Right.
sometimes when we're told, just do this, even if the science is saying that it works. I don't sometimes want to be told what to do. So thinking about how to support teachers implement these practices, how to actually, again, use data to sort of customize maybe the practice that they're using or the curriculum that they're handed,
Mm-hmm.
and using that as a
Mm-hmm.
scaffold as well to make these really informed decisions. And so day to day, and a lot of these days, it is thinking about those curricula and really how to empower and support teachers in the general education classroom, also interventionists, special educators, really on how to sort of align interventions with what we're using in core to make sure that we're making the biggest difference in the kids who struggle the most, which are the kids with dyslexia or other reading disabilities.
Sometimes teachers might not understand what the science of reading really is and like what the value is behind that. And they need to be shown. And, you're right about the data. The data tells them one thing, but they really have to understand what that really does for a kid. Like you said, teaching them how a child learns how to read, not just the science of the reading.
Well, and I can think of a lot of teachers when I'm like, well, we need to get trained in the science of reading, and gen ed teachers, classroom teachers or reading support teachers. And they're like, well, so do I need to get letters trained? Well, that's not the only game in town that you can that you can get the science of reading, structured literacy from. So
Definitely. I agree with that. I think that the mandated curricula can sometimes harm more than help. I think it's really important. I want to make sure I'm clear that we're using evidence-aligned materials,
yeah,
but I really want to make sure that we're empowering teachers at the same time to make really informed decisions and making sure, like you said, have that knowledge. It doesn't have to be from a certain curriculum provider or sort of letters or whatever it is, but
mm-hmm.
really help them understand. Teacher knowledge is really important when we think about these sort of, when you make adaptations, and having a good understanding of that, and also
Mm-hmm.
data literacy, like you said, Melissa, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So our favorite thing to talk about is dyslexia, obviously, because we're the Dyslexia Duo, and obviously you like it too.
Of
So
course.
in your view, what are some of the largest misconceptions about dyslexia, not only for children, but even adolescents?
That's a really great question, because a lot of these days I'm thinking a lot about these adolescents or kids, really, when I say that, beyond third grade, that really are still struggling to acquire proficient word reading skills. Because as we all know, all three of us, those word reading skills are really, really important, right? It's half the equation of learning how to read and be able to comprehend text, which is the goal. So one of the biggest misconceptions with those older kids who struggle to learn how to read or struggle with reading is that we need to just give them more phonics. And I see this a lot on social media about, I have an 8th grader who's struggling to learn how to read. I'm going to use UFly.
Yeah.
I'm going to use a K2 phonics program. And I think those intentions are so great, but older learners just really need, and research has shown this on my own sort of work with these kids as well, that these kids just need qualitatively different instruction than kids in K2 for different reasons. One of those being, these older students come with longer learning histories. They've had years of maybe guessing, avoiding reading, right? Or these really potentially rigid decoding habits, even if they got a really good K2 phonics program in core. Maybe an intervention. They really might be really, really rigid there. And so after third grade and beyond, really, we know these words they encounter are longer, they're morphologically complex, they're full of vowel variation, which these vowels in English are really, I'm sure you all both, the bane of my existence when teaching kids how to read and spell, because they're so variant. We can spell long A with so many different graphemes. Same thing with long E, right? That's really tough for them. And so it's really just a different instructional landscape. So that's sort of one of them. I have another one that I think is common, but one of them is the well-intentioned version of really, we just need to give them more phonics. And that really isn't the only way. But another big misunderstanding really is that accommodations alone are enough. And that really is something that I sort of I really want to make sure that I carefully articulate to the teachers I train and work with, is that accommodations, especially if these students are on IEPs or 504 plans, are essential and legally required, but they're not a replacement for instruction or remediation. And that we really, even if they're older, we cannot give up on strengthening their actual reading skills, those skill deficits, right? People often assume these older students, we might have just missed the window, right? But we know that's not true. They can make meaningful growth with the right approach and really at all levels of language. So really, we want to, if they really struggle with word reading, we're going to focus on that, but we need to make sure we're addressing all those levels of language at the word level, at the sentence level, text level, and so on.
I think that's your soundbite. I wrote it down. Accommodations aren't enough. Accommodations aren't a replacement for remediation. I think that's your soundbite right there. Thinking about the older kids still, and in fact, I just started doing dyslexia therapy. We're both CALTs, right? So we're certified academic language therapists. And I just started working with a 13-year-old. And I started with a baseline just to kind of see where she was. And typically it's a progress monitoring where they're single word decoding. And she kicked booty on it. She did great. And I'm like, good God, why? Well, flip the script. I gave her an encoding progress monitoring instead. There it is. There it is. So much of early literacy instruction focuses on decoding, but you emphasize the need to address word reading, multisyllabic words, and even spelling. So why do you think that's so important with our older kids?
Yeah, and this is, again, something I'm really interested in these days, is that we really see a massive drop off in decoding growth after second grade, but those literacy demands, those word-related demands just explode. And again, these readers in third grade and beyond are facing words like unbelievable, photosynthesis, especially in these content area texts with multiple syllables, multiple morphemes. We have reduced, vowel sound, schwa, right, is very common. Those vowel variability, shifting stress patterns. And so these struggling readers often, I'm finding, they fall into two camps. Or either guessers, which they rely on context, partial cues, these top-down strategies, which we know are extremely inefficient. Or there are these over decoders that are slow, sound by sound, maybe no flexibility. Again, these are the students that often had really good phonics instruction in K2, but they are really thinking about monosyllabic words and really attend to the rules and really are thinking about those vowel phoneme or those grapheme correspondences. And so these K2 phonics programs don't always fully prepare these students for the morphologically and these morphologically complex words in the upper grades. And so moving these kids from the sounding out to strategic, flexible problem solving, we add in some different things that we're not using in a K2 phonics program, like teaching them explicitly and modeling how to flex these vowel sounds when it doesn't sound right. Apply flexible syllabification word attack strategies, fix up mispronunciations, like really having them think about other words that or other ways to get out a word that they know in their oral vocabulary, and the chunk meaningful morphemes. And so ultimately, secondary readers need instruction that helps bridge really basic phonics instruction to multisyllabic word reading and fluent text level reading. And we do that through those sort of activities I was sharing, but also, like you said, involving encoding instruction and not really thinking about supporting them with their spelling skills, because we know if we can spell a word, we can most often read that word usually. And so that actually can help really train, especially if they have some gaps in their phonics knowledge, thinking about vowels usually, really helping them solidify those vowel correspondences that are, again, really, really tricky in our English and are not always one-to-one. So spelling really helps them train that muscle. I use a lot of all of these patterns, right, that they're seeing really automatically. We teach them, so we teach them phonics, they really have a good grasp, and they really take off. We call that statistical learning. We can see these probabilistic patterns in our language, and they're just picking them up really intuitively. But for kids with dyslexia, often that's not the case, right? We know they need more practice opportunities, and so more opportunities to respond, us to give them feedback. And so adding in the spelling, adding in really showing them how to flex vowel sounds and all of those things can really be helpful for these students that we're not doing in K2 phonics often.
So I have a question about that. The flexing the vowels, especially when they have a limited vocabulary because they've had such a hard time reading. They haven't acquired as much vocabulary. So do you have some simple tips that you could give us just really quickly about how you would help them flex that vowel? This is something I run into in my practice all the time. They have such a hard time with this.
Definitely. And so I think there's two different things when I think of fixing up or flexing. We have flexing vowel sounds, so trying different vowel sound variations. And the other one is to fix up mispronunciation. So if a kid reads a word like, I slept on a nice hotel pillow, when I say, hotel, that doesn't make sense. And we're not using
Right.
as much, this isn't context, this isn't guessing in this way, but we're having them think strategically, like, what word that makes sense there? I slept on a hotel pillow. And then they might get out, hotel, right? That's a mispronunciation fix up. Not as easy for kids with limited, English language knowledge or emergent bilingual students or students that are multilingual that are learning English. But on the other hand, the flexing the vowel sound is a different way that we can have them, that if they have a limited oral vocabulary. And what I like to do before I have them engage in this practice, we do a vowel roll call. On my whiteboard, I have A-E-I-O-U, Y at the bottom. And I said, all right, vowel roll call. Let's go ahead and get our brains ready. I want you to tell me the long and short vowel sound for each of the 5 vowels and go. We go A, E. Again, really helpful for even English learners because the vowels, right, in Spanish are so close to get their brains joined up. So we do that vowel roll call. All right, give me the 3 sounds of Y. Ready? So we do that to get our brains ready. And then I might model it briefly, model that think aloud of how really I fix up vowel sounds and then practice some with them. And so I find that vowel roll call, getting them ready to warm up really quickly, and then me modeling it quickly and showing them how I flex up. Hotel. Let me try the other sound. Hotel. There we go. That makes sense. And then
That's
having them practice. So that's one of those that I found to be helpful, really depending on the learner, their oral language vocabulary. And then the word too, you can either do a flex the vowel or flex the mispronunciation, make it a real word.
I love that. What a great idea. I love the vowel roll call. That's a neat thing I'm going to do. Roll call. Have a little megaphone.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, anything to make it fun, engaging, especially for these kids, right? It's not fun to not know how to read when you are, right, an older student. You've had years and years of difficulty, and the wear on these kids' social emotional, right, well-being is really, really tough. And so any way to make it fun, goofy, whatever, if they call it cringe, it's fine. We want them to just want to get them engaged with this and in practice. Yeah.
They kind of like the cringe secretly.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Okay, so my next question is about morphology. So we understand how crucial that is. I actually didn't know this until maybe about 5 or 7 years into my own education as far as being a therapist. I went to a training and I was like enthralled with all the information about morphology. And it just opened my eyes to how much more I could be teaching them, the kids, how to, know more words without having to decode as much. So can you talk to me about morphology and how that's a crucial component to building word level skills? And then what else can we do to help them kind of bridge that gap and increase their competency?
Yeah, morphology is a really great tool, like you said, that we can use. I think of it as it has dual power. It gives kids structural clarity around a word, right, internally, but then it also gives them sort of that semantic meaning component. So they're getting both. It's nice. They can attack words once that we teach them explicitly prefixes, suffixes, affixes, right, to attack a word structurally. And then they're like, oh, I can unlock meaning too at the same time. So it really is a great way to kind of bridge those word reading skills and also vocabulary that also goes right to that comprehension, right? When we kind of have that collateral effect there. So adding morphology is great too, is a really great key thing that we can do. Something that I'm finding, I'm going to say this a lot when we talk about older kids reading, is this idea of being flexible thinkers, and really as teachers modeling flexibility. So teaching students how to shift pronunciations, trying alternatives, fixing up errors when the first attempt doesn't work, which some kids just really don't want to do. Again, especially if they had a really great, great phonics K2 program that is really more sort of narrow in how they're learning these sort of skills, and it's maybe really rule based. So that's one of them, is really modeling being a flexible thinker, trying things out when we're reading, and that's okay. Another thing really is that connected text practice is essential. We have such a hard time getting kids moved from that isolated word reading to then fluent connected text reading. Doesn't matter throughout the lifespan, really, if the kid struggles to learn how to read. And so kids need, especially at this age, I think we're finding far more than isolated word reading drills, and not just reading at that word list, but really helping them generalize all those great things we're teaching them at the sound and word level into applying these word reading strategies inside real sentences, paragraphs, and text. And so that is really one thing, is really making sure we're getting them into connected text. And really, and this is sometimes I get some pushback from, but making sure that text is really stretched text. So we're kind of going from that decodable text in K2 here. Even if they're really struggling, maybe we're going to drop into that a little bit and provide some support, but really having them flex their muscles, attacking grade level text with our support, though, with our in the moment, not like go ahead and go read for 30 minutes on your own with grade level text, but you sitting with the child, you providing immediate error correction and really scaffolding, because the idea here really is to build strategic readers, and they're being exposed to this text already in, you know, their core classes. And if they're sitting with you as an interventionist, helping them apply the skills that you're teaching them, being flexible and all those things with that stretch text, which we know from the research is really a validated practice that we want to use. And it might feel uncomfortable for teachers, especially if you're coming from K2 and you're really thinking about those decodable texts, which are really important for practice, especially there. But when we get into older readers, that taking those training wheels off a little bit, even though it's scary, and maybe it's not exactly grade level, but we want to push them a little bit with us right there by their side.
No, I love that. That's part of our therapy sessions, especially when the kids are what considered advanced therapy students. We do that connected text piece with our kiddos. And because I'll have teachers that would come back to me and they'll say, hey, they're kind of stumbling through this text a little bit. And sometimes I look at the text and I go, well, that makes sense. It's a little hard. And then sometimes I'm like, well, no, they should be able to apply what they know. And my running joke with my students is, this isn't Vegas. What we do in here doesn't stay in here. You have to take it to every place else and make those connections. And I think it's so important that we do bring in those real world texts. And one of the things that it always makes me think about is when I've been doing dyslexia since God was a boy. And when Harry Potter first came out, my little 3rd and 4th graders would walk around with the, you know, they're that thick, those books.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, walk around with Harry Potter. I called it the Dyslexics Bible, right? So they'd walk around with the Harry Potter book under their arm. And I'm like, are you reading that? And they're like, no, because the words were 15 syllables all made up and 15 syllables long for them to practice with. But I loved that they wanted to try it and they wanted to attempt it. And I always got very discouraged when they'd have a classroom teacher take it away from them saying, that's not your reading level. You know, it really kind of bothered me a little bit. But going back to morphology, how much did you love that it got put in the IDA definition, by the way?
Yeah, no, I think it's really great that we're thinking about how to attend to that, because it can be really powerful. It can go the other way, though, when we think about it again. Everything is, I don't want to use the word balance. I use the word in harmony, right, with each other. We don't want to overemphasize or overcorrect. Right. But it is this incredible tool that we can, again, integrate into our instruction. Even really beyond, even in, 1st, 2nd grade, that there are these components, right? Especially when we think about irregular words, too, that we can sort of build in there that I think is really fantastic that we can emphasize in our intervention.
Yeah, no, I love that because, everybody would say, oh, their phonological awareness is intact. They must not be dyslexic. Well, that's also the one that's most sensitive to remediation. So if they've been through any RTI or NTSS, and for those younger grades, that's what the first stop is phonological awareness. That gets remediated typically, but you don't see the carryover, in my opinion, in other areas for those true dyslexic profiles. But how does spelling interplay with word reading and writing for students with dyslexia? Your research suggests that spelling practice could contribute or may contribute to efficient word reading. And I think you just have the research that you published on that, right?
Yeah. So this is a really exciting topic. So writing, spelling, all of these things. We know that spelling, word reading, writing, all of these things are deeply interconnected, but that this connection, interestingly, we're finding changes as students get older. So in early literacy, spelling is incredibly powerful because it helps students really crack the alphabetic principle, mapping sounds to letters in a really precise way. And so spelling forces kids to analyze every phoneme and grapheme, which makes it more cognitively demanding than reading. It's harder for kids, but it means that we should do it still. Yeah. When things are hard, we want to be able to make sure we're doing it. Spelling does matter. It does count really in that way. We're finding, this is a study that's under review, an experimental study that we did, But this is especially important for irregular high frequency words
Oh.
like the, was, said, could, because spelling really helps these kids build stable representations of words they really can't sound out cleanly, right? Because they're having to actually force sort of to really think through when they're spelling said, AI and said, AI usually says A, right? It doesn't say but it forces them to really make that connection. It really helps consolidate that knowledge there. So those high frequency irregular words also benefit from spelling. I love that spelling enhances the word reading, I'll say, but really we want to teach spelling so kids can write. So that's another sort of thing that we want to make sure so efficient to me, because we're helping kids with when we help them spell, read words better, but also spell words, which also then frees up all those cognitive resources for writing at that text level. And so spelling is great and for writing, but I love that it's really that double dose of literacy for reading as well. But we're finding, and the meta-analysis that was published in Journal of Learning Disabilities supports this. And also another study that we did when we looked at multisyllabic spelling versus reading is that as students move into the upper elementary, but more secondary grades, the impact of spelling on word reading does shift. And so research really shows that the biggest boost from spelling practice to that word reading mirrors the same drop off we see really in the elementary grades when we think about development. But it's still something that we should really make sure that we're doing. It's foundational for early readers, and for older students, it matters so they can write and sort of write, do text, write, whatever they're doing, right? Also, but are going to support other things to help word reading and not just spelling. Of course, we'll include it though.
Awesome.
I worked in a school district where they had something called a spelling flow list, and you do a pre-assessment of all the irregular words there was like 5 lists, A through D, A through E, or something like that. It started with A, the, in, and you go through and figure out what the kids do know and what they don't know. And whatever they don't know, you put on a list that they practice. And they have to practice these words 3 times in a row, get them correct. And once they get them all correct, then you can go on to the next set of words. But this was a skill that they had to practice every day when they came into class. And that really was supposed to build up their writing ability as well, just like you said. But I did notice a huge difference in their reading ability.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. That's a great way to do it too. I'm always saying too, the Friday spelling test, it's not the enemy. It's really not as much about the test, but really what we're doing in our instruction to support it. And that practice is so, so important, that directed practice. So I love that. I think that's we're doing some of that in research too, where we sort of are pre-testing, seeing the high frequency regular words that they don't know and doing that same sort of thing to help them, again, read those words better, but also, spell them so they can, because writing is so much more complex in general than reading. And we want to make sure those lower level skills are really, really fluent. So that's a great strategy.
Yeah. And I'll teach them like little things to help them remember. Okay, well, the word said, what's the first sound you hear? Okay, that's spelled with an S. We talk about the regular things and then we memorize the irregular.
That's exactly it. No, that's exactly what I tell teachers. I like to use the term expected. Is that expected or unexpected? Or do we know that usually make that sound or not? And helping them sort of analyze the structure of those words, just like you said, is a really powerful tool. It doesn't have to take a long amount of time either. We're not spending hours on spelling, right? It's really 10, 15 minutes a day, maybe in early literacy, kind of dropping off as we get up. But yeah, just like all those things are really great things to do.
I really love that you pointed out too that about the early ages and how crucial that is at the very beginning. And test. Okay, so
my favorite studies really looked at the relative benefits of spelling practice versus word reading practice. And so we had 2nd and 3rd graders with dyslexia, like really significant dyslexia. So most of these kids scored on average at the 2nd percentile on the tower or test of word reading efficiency. So 2nd percentile, very, very low spellers. So we randomized these 2nd and 3rd graders into 2 different groups. So we called them the spellers. So they were randomized to a spelling only condition where they only practice spelling words. And then we can randomize some of them to the reading group where they only read the certain words. And so we gave them the same set. We had 12 different words, and we really in this study focus on vowel variability. And so this is kind of me getting a little researcher nerdy, but we picked 6 different vowel sounds, and then we had pseudo words we trained them on, made their fake words. So we had high frequency vowel spelling words. So like AI is an example. So like in the word rain, right? But we had fake words. I think we had blate for the AI spelling, that high frequency spelling. Usually AI says A. But the low frequency
Mhm.
spelling would be like EI, like in veil, right? Very low frequency for those kids. And we had a different fake word that was matched on the same letters, phonemes, all those things. So, anyways, we had them practice spelling or reading high frequency vowel spellings or low frequency vowel spellings, right? And so we really wanted to see, it was very experimental to see really what's going to benefit these kids more when they read and spell these words. Is it reading practice or spelling practice? I thought, right, it'd be spelling practice because the literature hints towards that, but there's been no like experimental study where we really looked at this and made sure they weren't words they had been exposed to before, right? That's why we use fake words. But what we found after we had them engage in either spelling or reading practice, on almost every outcome of what we call orthographic learning. So we measured their spelling accuracy, their word reading, and then we had what's called an orthographic choice task where they had to
Oh.
identify the correct word out of a sequence of 4. There were some
Mhm.
visual foils, meaning the kind of the letters looked similar, or they were homophonic foils, like different graphemes for those letters. And the spellers outperformed the readers on every measure besides word reading. And what was interesting is that we did an initial test, post test, right after we trained them. And then we came back 1 week later and did a delayed post test because I'm a learning science guy too. I wanted to see the retention or durability of learning over time. And so these differences at immediate post test, when we analyzed the data statistically, doing lots of fancy things. But at immediate post test, nothing was different. The spellers and the readers performed about the same. All right. But 1 week later on that delayed post test was really interesting in that there was what we call statistical significance, meaning we can say that the spellers outperformed the readers 1 week later on that
Wow.
orthographic choice task and on that spelling task, which really means that spelling seems to function as this memory consolidator when we're thinking about word reading and spelling. We're not going to get immediate benefits, but we're going to get some retention benefits over time. Like we came back a week later and they knew more than they did at immediate post test, which
Interesting.
is so fascinating to me. Kind of, we're going to do more to look into this, but it really helps with that over time, that again, that memory consolidation. It forces deeper processing and more precise encoding, which I think really helps that learning stick. And so reading gives kids this exposure, but really spelling gives them enduring representation. It really helps. Again, I keep saying consolidate, but it does helps consolidate that memory over time. So it reinforces kind of what I thought intuitively, but I didn't think about as much of that delayed post test. I just wanted to see what they remembered. But when kids spell words, they're building these stronger word memories and when they read them. And I think it can be especially true because these were all kids with significant dyslexia. They often need higher intensity intervention, greater precision when we're teaching them, and more opportunities for deep engagement with the code. And so I'm really like, I love spelling. Spelling is the best. But really, when we strategically think about what the words we want them to spell are, it's those high frequency irregular words are really going to be helpful when we want to help them remember those words.
Now, one other question I had about that, were they handwriting or did they type?
Good question.
Handwriting. So
Okay.
I'm very low tech. So, and I think this is, we know, so we're seeing some of the benefits, right, of handwriting on memory retention as well. Even for college students, if you handwrite notes, you're going to remember more than typing notes. And so we did make sure to do handwriting, which was interesting is that the schools were nervous. I worked with 4 dyslexia schools. There were schools in New York City, so a school in Austin, and then also 2 schools in Atlanta. They were like, because we had them in there practicing, they had to practice spelling each word 6 times, which was kind of they were nervous. They were like, these kids are dysgraphic. They don't really like to write. They liked it. We made it like engage. It was like an engaging game. We told them we had a whole sort of thing. We did a whole spiel, but they did it. They liked it. They liked to see every learning trial. They got to see if they got it correct or not. And that was like really reinforcing to them. And so they kind of got to show the teachers after that, hey, look, they actually really enjoyed this. We can push the limits a little bit. Maybe we just have to think about gamifying a little bit, making it a little more engaging, right? So that was like a fun sort of added benefit too. But to answer your question, yeah, we wanted them to use handwriting.
That was a good question, Melissa. That was
Thanks.
actually really good. Okay, I had one and then her question blew it out of my brain. So, okay.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So let's talk about who we met at IDA, Tumbleweed.
Oh, I love Tumbleweed's decodable books, and they're for striving readers in grades 2 through 6. My favorite thing about them, in addition to the storylines,
is the inclusion of comprehension, spelling, and vocabulary activities.
Yes, and there's no guessing because they took out the visual distractions. They still have illustrations, but not right next to the print.
And Tumbleweed is easy to implement with any core or intervention program. Their teacher guides are jam-packed with multimodal approaches.
Check them out at tumbleweedpublishing.com. Hi, this is Aimee Rodenroth, and as part of the Dyslexia Duo podcast team and owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services, I want to talk to you about my business. Our COUT-trained team offers expert virtual or in-person therapy located in Prosper, Texas, using proven dyslexia curricula like Take Flight, Build, MTA, Alphabetic Phonics, and Reading by Design. We also provide crucial independent evaluations and advocacy services. Don't wait. Empower your child today. Visit www.discovereed.com to learn more. That again is www.discovereed.com. Discovereed, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show. What structured literacy practices do you find most effective in classrooms, or maybe if these are homeschooled kids at home, for students who have not responded to traditional instruction?
Yeah, a lot of my doctoral training was focused on this. And so for students who really haven't responded to typical instruction, let's say typical instruction is good, sound, evidence-based instruction, right? The most effective approach, and I really want to overemphasize this, is not a single program or a single practice, but really refine. It's a validated intervention program, whatever that is, that's really matched to a student's needs, and a decision-making framework. So that means starting with what we call a validated tier 2 intervention. Some examples: corrective reading, word connections, rewards. I'm thinking about older kids here a little more. These programs provide these systematic and explicit routines that many students need, and they're backed by evidence as well. And so we take one of those validated programs, let's say those validated tier 2 programs, and we intensify it with what we call data-based individualization. And DBI, or data-based individualization, is really the engine that helps these non-responders grow. It relies on frequent progress monitoring and iterative problem solving. And we really make instructional changes based on the data, and we're not guessing. And so when I say intensify, what that can look like is, let's say I have a kid in rewards is a common one that we use in upper elementary or middle school. I have a kid in the rewards reading program, and I'm taking progress monitoring data weekly, and I'm going to be using oral reading fluency data because middle to first grade and beyond, we know that's a really great proxy for overall reading achievement. So I'm going to take my weekly oral reading fluency probes 1 minute at a time. I'm going to analyze my graph after about 4 to 6 weeks, and I'm going to see if we're trending in the right direction, if they're making adequate progress based on technical, but ROI, or rated improvement norms for that grade level, right? So I'm going to be looking at their acceleration, and I want to make sure that my instruction's actually working. And this is a big one I really try to train my teachers I work within, and when I work with schools and districts, is that we want to make sure the intervention we're using is actually working. Even parents that are having their children in tutoring, like Orton Gillingham-based tutoring or any other tutoring, reading therapy, dyslexia therapy, that we can actually see that the instruction's working. And so if they're not making adequate progress, or they're being what we call slow or non-responders, we're going to intensify. That can be, I talk about them as different dials we're going to turn up. So we could increase the dosage, more instructional time, more sessions per week, which is sometimes really hard for schools to do, or increasing opportunities to respond, practice opportunities. We can increase the explicitness, or slowing down the rate of introduction of maybe new graphemes, vowel teams, right? Adjusting materials to reduce cognitive load. Or when it's necessary, maybe switching to a different evidence-based program. So there are different ways that we can intensify our intervention, but right when we do that, we're going to keep taking our progress monitoring data. And I really like to train interventionists and the teachers I work with really as researchers. Like, I want you to view yourself as a special educator, as a dyslexia interventionist, almost as a researcher. You're taking data, you're analyzing data. And I think it's really empowering for teachers to really view themselves as that really data expert, and really have data literacy around what that means to intensify. And it's so fun to show teachers a progress monitoring graph, okay, have them adjust instruction. We make a little dotted line, and then to see the rate of improvement from when that adaptation was made can be really great. And so I like thinking of that as really what I've seen help work the best, because research really supports DBI, or data-based individualization, that intensive intervention in the research, but also in practice too. We can see, and I really make sure to share this with educators in schools, is that these students are not just stuck, right? They just need instruction that's more precise and more responsive. It is never the child, never. Any IEP meeting I've ever been in, any parent, it is never the child. It's our instruction. And if we can adjust instruction based on the data that we're seeing and based on our expertise, then we can help them achieve success. And so it helps these teachers individualize or customize while still staying anchored to research-based practices, and really ensures that we're not just trying harder, which is important, again, well-intentioned, but we're teaching smarter.
You're talking about what we do in therapy settings. Honestly, we when we have, it's not a nice way to call it, but they're non-responders or flatlining in therapy. How do you get the response? You do more sessions. You have more opportunity for them to practice. You have more opportunity for them to respond. I love all this because I get that question a lot. Hey, this kid's not responding to what I'm doing. Well, what are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. Let's talk about how we can differentiate for that child. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's important. And really, again, it's like we were talking about too, that you're doing in therapy. You're also need to train teachers on how to hypothesize what dial should we increase. It might not be more sessions, but it might be, again, the program being not aligned to the student, or it could be, again, they need more practice opportunities. I find a lot, and this is anecdotal, but I think some research would support this, that we're not providing enough practice opportunities with connected text, maybe, right? And so that's going to impede, right? And so that is something we have to sometimes turn up the dial on, what actual practice opportunity within the instructional framework or routines that we're using. We want to maybe spend more time on spelling, or maybe spend more time on a certain area. So that's exactly it. It's making these researcher-driven hypotheses, which again is, I think, and I bet you both can speak to this, it is empowering for you to all right, let's look at the data. Let's drill down. We might need to do some more diagnostics, right, to really see what's going on under the hood. We might need to do some more specific measures, and not just, a 1-minute probe that's going to give us a little information. But we could use that 1-minute probe and look into the diagnostics of, okay, what words are they missing? Are they making phonological, orthographic, morphological errors, right? All of these cool things that I nerd out about and love to train and work with teachers on, because it's so empowering once you know how to use data and really adjust your instruction well.
Love it.
So, talking about data, pretend like somebody is listening to this and they don't know what kind of data to collect, because there might be homeschool parents out there that want to really help their child and they are listening to get some more information. So, what kind of data should someone gather to help them make those choices and make different decisions to go forward?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that the word data, right, can be scary and overwhelming. And there are so many different types of data. When I think about instruction or intervention, those types of data, the first type I think about is that we call that diagnostic data. That's really, I call it under the hood data. What specific skills are they struggling with underneath the skill? So if we think about, they struggle with word reading, we're going to drill down really carefully, right? And think about, when I think of word reading, we have, right, their phonics knowledge. Can they identify letters first, right? What sounds do they know? What letter sound correspondences do they know? All right. What errors are they making when they're reading single syllable words with these letter sound correspondences in them, right? That's one piece of diagnostic data. It's going to give me really specific information on exactly what they are struggling with. Because when they say a parent or a teacher, oh, they struggle with reading. Okay, reading is huge. We have reading comprehension. Well, they struggle with word reading. All right. Well, even then we have to drill down, look at their right phonic awareness skills, maybe even their vocabulary skills, their phonics skills, their spelling skills as well, right? Can give you a lot of insight as to really how they are grappling with the code. And so that diagnostic piece is really one of them. Really informs what to teach and where I'm going to start with the child. And I always, especially with early literacy K2, we can link what they know in diagnostics then to a scope and sequence of a program. We want to make sure we're matching, right, instructional need to instruction. That's where diagnostic data really gives us. But then once we put them in intervention, this is the part that I really want to make sure parents at home, parents that have kids that are getting tutored, teachers as well, special educators, is that progress monitoring data then answers the question, again, is my instruction working?
Right.
Diagnostic, where do I start? Progress monitoring, is the instruction working? And it's freely available. Parents can get this on Dibble's 8th edition on grades K through 8, are these progress monitoring probes that are psychometrically sound, meaning there's lots of data to support them, and that they're 1 minute to administer, especially when we're reading, they're all a minute. So we have a kid read for a minute. That minute gives us so much information onto where they're sitting, right, on grade level, and can help us think about, again, is our instruction working? And so those two pieces are the biggest pieces I will stress to parents or teachers when we think about data in terms of instruction. We're also going to use data if we're going to identify a kid with dyslexia, right? We're going to look at achievement data, cognitive data, all of those pieces. But that data is not going to really tell us, going to give us a little indication of where we should maybe look at diagnostics, but it's not going to tell me what to teach on Monday. It's really going to tell me, do they have a reading disability really or not, in a way? So that's sort of how I think about that. But really that progress monitoring and diagnostic data is really, really vital.
I really love the way you tied that all in, and you really brought it down to the people that might not be educators who really do need to understand that and want to understand it. So you really gave a great layman's terms explanation for that. So I really appreciate that. And then is there anything different for adolescents that parents should be looking for?
Yeah, for adolescents, we have to get a little more creative a little bit when we think about adolescent readers. So we have a lot of validated measures for early literacy, like Dibbles I talked about is freely available K-8. Once we get beyond that, there's some assessment suites that schools might use that have some data there, but we're really going to be looking a little more about oral reading fluency is always going to be a great proxy of overall reading achievement. So we can always look at their oral reading fluency. But then what I like to drill down more with adolescents is looking at their word reading behaviors within oral reading fluency. So looking at word reading accuracy, looking at writing samples as well, we really sometimes need to pinpoint why that fluency is weak. I want to know their reading behaviors. Are they guessing? Are they confusing vowel sounds still? What gaps in their phonics knowledge do they have that I can address briefly and kind of get in, get out? And so I like to pinpoint a little more with adolescents. Is it more inefficient decoding, limited vocabulary? Sometimes they're slower processors. So we talked a little bit earlier about how some kids with dyslexia actually don't have phonological processing deficits. I was reading a neuropsych report, a very robust 49-page neuropsych evaluation of a 10th grader with dyslexia, and phonological processing was intact. But what wasn't is this rapid automized naming, which we can think about as just processing or fluency, right? We cannot bypass that cognitively. We've tried to do some cognitive training, meaning we try to actually improve their fluency speed, just like general across their cognition. We're not having luck with that. So we really can't bypass that mechanism. What we can do though is help supplant all that information for word reading, meaning phonology, orthography, and the semantics morphology piece really helps them sort of not bypass that cognitive mechanism, meaning that what's happening in their brain, but helps them when they come to these words, retrieve them more rapidly or more fluently. And so with adolescents, especially if their phonological processing is intact, which again, this is why I don't like hearing that, which is again, well-intentioned, but let's use a K2 U fly for a 10th grader who can't read. And it's there's so much more than that we need to attend to. And so for adolescents, that's where I think about it a little differently, but really at any age, effective literacy instruction intervention, as we know, we want to make sure we have frequent sensitive progress monitoring, really with oral reading fluency being that anchor, and this sort of whole framework of database individualization then coming around is the mechanism that can help really translate that data into action.
I'm just loving everything you're saying. So thinking about broader impacts, what changes, and this might be something that you notice being at the university, what changes need to be made in teacher prep programs to increase awareness and understanding of dyslexia? Because some colleges, some universities are doing a great job with it, but most aren't. So what, in your opinion, do you think needs to change?
Oh, I have a lot of opinions on this. Mostly because of my experience coming from a teacher preparation program, again, well-intentioned teacher preparation program in my undergraduate, experience. that did not prepare me to even, I think, be a really phenomenal general education teacher,
Right.
which again, most of our kids with dyslexia spend most of their time in the general education classroom. And so focusing on those educators and pre-service teacher education is really, really important. So really with all of that, and I do agree, we're having, because of state mandates, again, which is good in a lot of ways, but also, there's some resistance there.
Yeah.
We really need to tighten the alignment between what we know from research and what we teach in these teacher preparation programs. I think that, again, this is me saying this, and I'll say this on the record, is that too many programs still present reading as this ideological debate
Yes.
rather than this scientific field.
Yep.
And so we have different departments in our teacher preparation programs. I'm in a special education department, right? There's other folks that are in elementary education department that is separate. And
Yeah.
most college of education really thinking about that we view this differently. And so I don't view that as an ideological debate, but sometimes candidates might leave a program with knowing maybe theories of reading, but not really how kids actually learn to read or what to do when they don't, or the science of really teaching reading. And so I think really starting with that, teacher prep needs explicit coursework on the structure of language. In the state of Georgia now, every single pre-service teacher, no matter if they're a PE teacher, a special educator, a gen ed teacher, they teach a class, or have to take a class on the structure of language, learning about phonology, orthography, morphology, syntax, not as these abstract concepts really, but as instructional tools. And really teachers can't teach what they don't understand. So having that as a baseline of like foundations of reading instruction in that way of all, not just, again, it's not just phonics, right?
Right.
But all the different things that we really need is really great. And for me, being in the special education world and thinking about kids with really persistent reading difficulties, is that dyslexia should not be a footnote or a single lecture. And my department, and I run the dyslexia program, we have 4 courses that all special educators take on dyslexia. So I teach a course on word reading instruction assessment. There's a language comprehension assessment course as well. So we get both of those. We have an entire course on the foundations of literacy instruction for these kids. And then we have a practicum course. And so all of those things need to be woven throughout assessment, intervention, accommodations, progress monitoring. And then within this whole MTSS, or multiple tiers of systems of support framework, and really with this idea that dyslexia is the most common learning disability that we have in schools, and preparation really needs to reflect that prevalence. And then all of that then really grounding pre-service teacher education in these evidence-based practices, not just exposing them, but really real practice, modeling it, coaching them, micro-teaching, practicum experiences, and all of that. And so all of those things is really where I think we are trending in the right direction in teacher preparation. And I can say this in the state of Georgia for sure.
Good.
And also knowing about what other states are doing as well. Again, mandated sometimes is good, but really this holistic, it really takes a village, right? It takes this whole entire collective efficacy of general education teachers, special education teachers, the interventionists, and all it all. So that's sort of my view right now on where we're at. So I'm excited about it. There's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really exciting time to be in a position that I'm in teacher preparation, in research, and really talk to people like you all that are doing it in different ways as well. Like it takes really this whole community coming together.
I agree
Right.
completely.
I mean, I know when I went through my undergraduate program, I had no idea about dyslexia. Nobody taught me anything about it. So when I was presented with this opportunity to teach a dyslexia course while somebody was on maternity leave because I couldn't find a job anywhere, I was like, okay, but I don't really know anything about it. She was like, it's okay. I'll give you a quick tour of the program and you can do it. And it was like terrifying. And I thought, I'm going to mess these kids up. And she was great. She taught me how to do it. And of course, I went back and got more education. I know what I'm doing now. I was just kind of fumbling my way through that first time. But with that said, I think the teacher prep programs at universities do need to be having courses like you're doing in their curriculum.
It's great. And I will say one last thing on this that I want to make sure that I hit is that we need to, at the university or the teacher preparation level, model coherence. Like our pre-service teachers shouldn't hear one message in their literacy class and then come to me in my evidence-based methods class, right? Which can happen sometimes. And that's really aligning as a college. We just launched a specialist degree in literacy science that is throughout all the departments. So we have myself in the department, I work in the special education area. We have middle and secondary grades department comes together, elementary ed department, and we work together with our collective expertise to develop a specialist program that really is across all of these different areas and different perspectives. And that's really makes me excited because we really want to make sure that we model that for our students because they're going to be in schools and we want them to be in coherent systems in their schools too.
Right.
And so aligning around a shared understanding of how reading develops and how to support struggling readers, but also how to support readers who aren't struggling. That is something as well. I taught in a school, my last school, for students with twice exceptional needs, meaning some of them, they had a disability in an area, but they also had giftedness in other areas as well. And some kids are not going to struggle to learn how to read. How do we support them as well? That's not my area of work and research, but we should, again, think about how to support all readers in a system. And so I think at the university level, if we do that, using our collective and shared expertise, it's really going to help empower schools, districts, and most importantly, these students as well.
I agree. I love that you're doing that. So thank you for your work on that too. Okay, so if you could speak to one educator, one parent, and or one older student with dyslexia, what would one key takeaway be that you would offer them from your research and practice?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Let's start with the teacher. So the teachers I get to work with both the ones that take my coursework at the university, ones that I get to work with and train at school districts and the state level as well, is they're really thirsty and hungry for this knowledge, which is really exciting. And so what I would say to them is keep learning, keep adjusting, and really, again, going back to data, let the data lead you. Maybe, and not the program always, right? We can customize our programs. Let that data lead you. You're the expert in this area once you go ahead and look at if they're responding to instruction. And so what the data are saying, trust your gut with that and have data literacy around that and really empower yourself with that data to be able to make these informed instructional decisions. That's what I would say to the teacher. To the parent, I get to hear from a lot of parents who are advocating for their children with dyslexia. And I've been in IEP meetings and I've worked with families and I've seen the social emotional impact that has on the student, but also the parents and the families. And so for those parents, I keep saying, keep advocating because I know that they love their child. And that's really enough. Keep advocating, do your best. And really what I would say to them, it's not your fault. There are a lot of parents that take a lot of blame that we should have lived in a different neighborhood for the school district, or I should have read to them more at home. And it's not their fault. These kids with dyslexia, kids with these persistent reading difficulties, right? We do the best that we can. And it is just sort of this atypical development that we can figure out together. And so stick with that advocating and know that it's not your fault and don't blame yourself is what I would say to them. And then for these students, especially older students, which I really do feel for, I always, when I'm working with an older student, I'm always real with them. I say, yeah, this sucks. This is not fun. It's hard now, but put in the work now, and it's going to help you open doors that you can't even see yet. Just stick with it. Stick with this grind. It's a lot, but you're going to be so much better off once you have these literacy skills. We know how close literacy is linked to your economic success, your educational outcomes, and also your health outcomes as well. We know that adults with low literacy rates have adverse health outcomes and are more apt to get disease and for so many different reasons. And so really sticking with becoming a better reader and writer is going to serve you well.
Okay, finally,
thank you.
What project do you have that's coming up or that's ongoing or new or I don't know, developing that you're most excited about and why?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm really excited. We are developing a spelling intervention program that's going to be open source that can be layered on top of any existing reading or intervention program, really aimed for kids in grades 1 through 3. And so a lot of what I hear from teachers is I research spelling. It's my area. I love to be able to recommend a program for teachers that maybe don't have the deep knowledge or expertise, but really want to help their students. And so the programs that we have are don't have evidence to support them. When I'm saying a program like something you could buy or pick up or download off the internet, don't have either evidence to support them or the one that we do have that I do recommend, which is Spelling Mastery. Sometimes teachers don't want to use that program. It was developed in the 1970s. It's a phenomenal direct instruction program. I actually have an ongoing project right now where we're having parents provide these lessons to their children, which is going well. So parents like it, hard to get teacher buy-in. And so we're developing spelling intervention, again, called Spell Squad, that has these instructional routines. It's a little more engaging, but it's still direct, explicit, and systematic. And we're really looking at these high frequency regular words, training them on those through the intervention. And also what we're looking at is the consistency of these vowel team correspondences, because we know kids really, really struggle to spell those because there's so many options. And so right now, kind of developing, testing out different routines that are going to work better. We're looking at different types of words. So we're in that development testing phase, working with real teachers, which is also great to get their input. So the program's actually used by them and not sit somewhere. And so that's a really exciting thing that I have going on right now that I'm hoping that we can be able to push out here soon.
That's amazing.
Is that for kids with dyslexia or all children?
So it's really for kids who struggle with word reading and spelling in general. So really what we're aiming to do is for that. It's going to be again, one of those tier 2 programs, so that we'll have that. But then if I have a kid with dyslexia that really struggles, and we can use, again, DBI or the data to really help intensify it. So it's for all students that are really not responsive to the good K3, K2 phonics program that involves sometimes some spelling or encoding, but we know spelling lags behind word reading significantly for these kids. And so it really is for kids who struggle, any kid who struggles.
All right. Okay. We have lightning round questions for you. So don't think, just say it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Here's the first one. What's a myth about dyslexia you wish would disappear?
Brain balancing, brain exercises.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Melissa's a big time night owl. Yeah, our texts are like, I'm 5 a.m. She's 2 a.m. I'm like, we just missed each other
by a few hours.
I love my morning routine. So
I do too. All right. Favorite literacy researcher or mentor who's influenced your work?
I have to go with my advisor, Dr. Tost.
One book every educator should read about reading science.
Direct Instruction Reading is sort of my reading instruction Bible by Carnine and colleagues. It's been around forever, but I love that book.
If you could fix one thing about teacher prep programs overnight, what would it be?
Ending the reading wars and really coming together, like I said, to have this collective, efficacy and shared vision.
Mm-hmm.
What's your definition of success?
Doing things that are aligned with your values and having a good time doing it.
I like it. What's the most underrated skill in teaching older, struggling readers?
Writing.
Mm-hmm. I think we've established that in this podcast today.
Is there a skill you've always wanted to learn but haven't?
Pottery, I think, which is a very interesting skill. I want to be able to do pottery a little better. So I think that's one.
Like the ceramics?
Yeah, ceramics, pottery, kind of that sort of thing. I need to get more in touch with some other hobbies. So there's one that I love
doing ceramics in high school. I want to do that again too.
Yeah.
I did it in Girl Scouts. Okay, the best piece of advice you received about balancing research and life?
To really work when it makes sense for you. I think sometimes that I go, sometimes I have these sprints that I'll do and then I'll rest. And so that sprint rest sort of mentality advice I've gotten is really helpful. So I'll go I'm on a bender right now of weeks and weeks and weeks working, and then we'll take some time off and relax and then go back into it.
I like that idea.
I have guilt when I relax. I have great guilt.
Me too. But I have to go away. I have to go totally away and leave my computer at home, which is hard.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, one hope you have for the future of dyslexia education in 5 years.
Again, kind of what I said about all coming around this shared vision and really supporting each other and not blaming kids or families in schools is a really big one.
This has been a really great interview. I mean, we didn't even get to all of our questions. Because your answer would lead to a different question because I don't know if people know, but we send questions ahead of time just to not take anybody off guard. And we started developing our own questions in our head, and that's good. It should be kind of organic like that. But I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm glad you're a real person and you're not like some AI thing that kept showing up on my social media.
Yes.
That makes me feel good. Thank you. No, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been really great. I love going on these and translating research and practice and chatting with great practitioners in the field. So thank you.
Well, maybe we should have you back sometime.
Anytime.
All right. That would be great.
Happy to be back.
Awesome. So this is Amy.
And Melissa.
And we're the
Dyslexia Duo.
Until next time. Bye.
The Dyslexia Duo hosts are Melissa Dean
and Aimee Rodenroth. The producer is Greg Rodenroth.
Dyslexia awareness is so important. Please share with your friends, family, and anyone who needs to know more about dyslexia.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at the Dyslexia Duo.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.